think people really know the true hypnotic power of television. You know how it pulls us in and just keeps telling us to consume, buy, and tells us to hate each other and separates us and causes the greatest divides, all under the name of entertainment. And every time I turn on my TV, it's just like no surprise. It's all of those programs, isn't it? Pushing out lies. And in between there's the adverts, and they do it again. And they're trying to convince us that we're friends. And have us trained like good little soldiers. 1, 2, 3, 4.
They say we're going to spend $1 trillion this Christmas, believe it or not.
Once again, see how mild and good tasting cigarettes can be. Once again, slow motion.
Hi, I'm the OBG, and welcome to show number 5. So I'll just start off by saying this is a show about the people, by the people, for the people, and it can work if you contribute. So please send your stories, things you want me to cover, images, videos, or your music to obgchat@gmail.com, and together we can do this, because this is the aim. It's the aim to grow a show that grows until we have regular viewers that we can pull away from the mainstream for 10 minutes every day, and that would be a measure of our success. Which reminds me, I've got to set my jingles up. Right, yeah, I'll be going. This will be good. This is going to be a good one. I'll be talking about Greta Thunberg later, part 2. Some bits in between, and a few other things. I think we may have a technical problem here. Just bear with me. I'm going to have to switch off, and I'll be with you in about 1 minute.
I think people really know the true hypnotic power of television. You know how it pulls us in and just keeps telling us to consume, buy, and tells us to hate each other and separates us and causes the greatest divides, all under the name of entertainment. And every time I turn on my TV, it's just like no surprise. It's all of those programs, isn't it? Pushing out lies. And in between there's the adverts, and they do it again. And they're trying to convince us that we're friends. And have us trained like good little soldiers. 1, 2, 3, 4.
They say we're going to spend $1 trillion this Christmas, believe it or not.
Once again, see how mild and good tasting cigarettes can be. Once again, slow motion.
Television. You know how it pulls us in and just keeps telling us to consume, buy, and tells us to hate each other and separates us and causes the greatest divides, all under the name of entertainment.
Right, okay. Let's do that little filler again. Okay, so as I was saying, the aim is to create a show that grows until we have regular viewers that we can pull away from the mainstream, and if we can pull them away for 10 minutes a day, that would be a measure of our success. And it's something that I've wanted to do all my life. I love talking, I love creating, I love communicating with people, and I like to pull people away from the mainstream. If it means I've got to do a song, a dance, and have them listen to me, and it's not about me and my ego, oh, listen to me, look what I'm doing. It's just like, look at this, stop looking at that, because, you know, TV's corrupting our minds. And if anyone could let me know if any of the sounds, if there's any problems with sound, because sometimes things double up here, and I'm not sure if my mic's picking it up well enough. Okay. Superb. Right, so I'm going to get straight into the nitty gritty, and I want to say I love creating thank yous. You know, I'm a conjurer, if you will, and absolutely love, I just love hearing a genuine thank you. And I don't even truly expect that people have to say it, but it's just great knowing that I have the power to, to conjure that phrase out of somebody with an act of kindness. Because words are spells, and people often, we can get somebody to do our bidding with a simple hello and a good morning, because that invites people into our world. And hopefully, if they reciprocate, it levels the playing field. And a genuine hello conveys 1,000 words and feelings, along with a genuine smile. But no, and this is for the men, it isn't a come on. Thank you, please, hello, and a smile really mean bring it on, rude man, I'm open. It's like one-shot tennis, You've been served a hello, you return the ball, and that's it. But I digress. I help to create the thank yous in my world, and it really makes me content. So I'd suggest you give it a go. Say hello to someone in the morning. So I'm going to get right into the nitty gritty. On October the 19th, a state of emergency was declared in Chile, and the state of emergency was applied mainly to Santiago, and it was set to last for up to 15 days. And the president, Sebastián Pinera, he said that there will be no room for violence in a country with the rule of law at its core. However, when you take a closer look, it appears that the violence is really coming from the ruling class, state-sanctioned against the people, and it's a pattern that we're seeing globally right now. Michelle Bachelet, she made history in 2006 by becoming the first woman elected president in Chile. However, 4 years later, voters swung to the opposite direction, and they chose this conservative businessman, Sebastián Pinera, as president. And Bachelet was voted in again in 2014, but Pinera took it back yet again in 2018, and there general elections. And there still are doubts to the long-term effects of the transformations made by Bachelet and her transformative policies. And she made sweeping changes, in fact, for civil rights, women's issues, and also access to higher education. And Bachelet fought hard, but due to Chile's constitution of not allowing a second term, she had to leave behind everything that she was building. So when Pinera, 68 years old, ran for a second time, defeated the left-wing former journalist Alejandro Hilaire, who was favoured to replace Bachelet, Pinera convinced voters that he was the best person that was suited to jumpstart the economy. And the issue here, as I see it, is that we're often swayed by people that have financial worth, and we consider that our countries should be run by businessmen, which in turn means running a profit-based society. And I don't think any billionaire has made that much wealth through fair means. And just the fact that they possess that much of the world's wealth is surely a sign not to vote for them. So moving forward to recent events, the latest protests follow grievances over the rising cost of living, and in particular healthcare, education and public services. And according to some, the metro fare rise, which recently occurred, was a spark that ignited the student protests, and the students in Chile are quite a formidable body. So Marco Antonio de la Parra, he's a psychiatrist, and he said that over the past decade the Chilean state has lost touch with these problems, and that the places that they have been targeted are deeply symbolic, as transport and energy represent the success of the state and the model that it upholds. And this is the same in many countries. When it kicks off, people want to go and tear down the monuments and so on. So, tens of thousands of protesters made their way to Chile's capital, setting up barricades and clashing with the riot police. And Pinera actually offered an apology and promises of economic reform. However, this didn't appear to quell the conflict, and the brutality of the police cannot be overlooked, and the death toll has already risen to 18. And this is a result of pushing the working class too hard, and this is a result of greed from privatised companies. Just bear with me a second, just in case. Something's wrong with my system. No. Okay, let's have a look. Right, no. If anything's wrong, just throw a comment in. I'll find it eventually. So, this is a result of greed from privatised companies who are hell-bent on increasing profits annually. And this is a result of countries being run by billionaire financiers that have no connection with the working class. And it remains to be seen what will happen with the Chilean people in the aftermath. And this is why I believe we're heading towards a working class revolution globally. And it really is time for change. Now, we can do this without a war. And this is where the ruling elite are moving towards, I think. I really feel that they're going to drag us to rock bottom, then create a common enemy and attempt to set us up against each other. World War III, anyone? War sucks, and that's a fact. So moving on, I want to talk about one of my favourite anti-war art pieces, which happens to be Guernica by Pablo Picasso. Let's talk about it.
Something going on in this mind. If I know I'm looking so hard, I can't find it. Something going on in this head.
Oh,
look
boy.
at me, I used to be a funky dread.
So in the late afternoon of April 26, 1937, German bombers appeared in the skies over Guernica, and they left behind a devastation that has become symbolic of the atrocities of war. After this, the Spanish government commissioned Pablo Picasso, the Cubist artist, to create a piece to commemorate the event, and the result is Guernica. And this amazing work of art measures 11 feet by 25 feet wide, and it contains within it the symbology depicting the horror of that day. And its true meaning is not immediately clear, and I believe it is left wide open to analysis and interpretation. So let's take a closer look. And Guernica is, without a doubt, an anti-war painting. Picasso actually said, "My whole life as an artist has been nothing more than a continuous struggle against reaction and the death of art. In the picture I am painting, which I shall call Guernica, I am expressing my horror of the military caste, which is now plunging Spain into an ocean of misery and death." And in the image, Picasso features a bullfight. And however, the image doesn't show the bull actually being slayed. I'd advise you to go and take a look at it afterwards, actually. It's an amazing image, but it doesn't actually show the bull being slayed. Instead, the matador lays dead. And some interpret this as commentary from Picasso, maybe saying that he wishes to see the death of the national war machine. And the bull is the only thing that is peaceful within the image. And it's hard to deny the symbolism, even though Picasso claims it's simply a painting with no meaning. And it could also be interpreted as the Spanish national pride, as the bull is a symbol of Spain. Another striking feature overall is that the image uses a monochromatic scale, specifically that of black and white, and this also helps to further convey its anti-war message with its darkness. Beneath the bull, there sits a woman holding a dead child, and she's looking upwards, her eyes in the shape of tears. And this image is meant to resemble the classic Catholic image of the Virgin and Child. And further down is a dismembered soldier. In one of his hands, he carries a sword, and the other a flower, which is open to so much interpretation. And above everything is a light bulb. And this is one of the hardest things that people have tried to interpret, because the symbolism here in this particular item has been debated amongst scholars for the longest time. And some say it symbolises technology. Who knows? If you look at the centre of the image, there's a wounded horse, and we can only make out the horse's head with its mouth open as it gazes out at the horror of war. And there's much, much more to this image, and I would actually recommend doing a search for Guernica symbolism. But regardless of that, it's still an amazing image when taken as a whole. War. What is it good for? Okay, before I start don't get me wrong, I have to make a disclaimer, because too many gentlefolk are simply seeking trigger words. And misquote me if you will, but I deplore you to listen twice before you do. And it's just something that happened this week, several times in fact, after I get phone calls and messages of people and people I've met out in the street, and just reading stuff on Facebook. But I really believe a lot of people are using mental health as an excuse for their position in life or their bad behaviour. I see you. And I've come across many people in real life and on Facebook mostly, in fact, that live perfect drug-taking, party-going, work-attending lives, but as soon as they feel that they haven't or can't achieve beyond what they think people expect of them, then they pull the mental health line. And I think people should quit holding on to these things as if they're congenital. My OCD, my cold, my bad back, my, dyslexia. You don't own those things. They don't have the power to control us. We have the power to ward them off and to cure many of these self-assigned illnesses. And I'm not having a go at people who have, real mental health problems. I know it's a real thing, but I'm not talking about that. you know. I would often call in a sickie when I was younger, but only as an excuse. I haven't been ill for the longest time because I won't invite it within. And I don't lay claim to ownership of none of those things that can break through my defences. And as an aside, I remember when I was gaming Facebook in the earlier days, and I'd correct someone's spelling. You know, it's kind of become a thing now. It's kind of a joke. And I learned two things from it. People will start name-calling toward of criticism, even if it's constructive. And people claim they're dyslexic just to save face over a simple spelling mistake. And I swear the majority of these mental health claims are simply come-downs anyway. Stop it. Okay, so I don't know if you've seen The Joker. It's a tough film. Is it a film about the hard left or not? That's a question. Because it seems that the recent release of The Joker has caused some controversy, with some critics calling it a leftist movie, while others are purely seeing it as a movie that should not be taken too seriously. So what do we have here? You know, like, movies have always been used as a tool for propaganda, so why should this cause a sudden stir? Why the outrage? Is it indicative of the current struggle between the left and right that is prevalent today? And would the movie have passed as dark entertainment just a few years ago? In fact, the director of the movie, Todd Phillips, he said, "I think it's because outrage is a commodity. I think it's something that has been a commodity for a while. What's outstanding to me is, in this discourse in the movie, is how easily the far left can sound like the far right when it suits their agenda. It's really been an eye-opening for me." So the consternation around the film has even caused Warner Brothers to issue a statement. However, I'll get into that next week or on the next show with a deeper look at what the Joker represents and how people are perceiving it. So I'm going to move straight on to the biggie, and that's Greta Thunberg and climate change. And this is part 2. It's quite long. I decided to break it into 2 parts. If you want to see the roles of the players, which I explained previously, go and look for the OBG Show 004 and get the full nasty. So, moving on.
There's a man who contradicts. Wait, he's the type of guy to you. There's no first place, but he's part of a race. Eyes lie, but take a look inside. They mirror the sights you'll see.
So, as a research of Rebecca Widemo, an independent journalist, suggests, Thorin, once he learned that Greta had won second prize in a writing competition about the environment held by the Svenska Dagbladet newspaper, approached Greta and the other winners and invited them to join his school strike. No one agreed to participate, so as her mother claims, Greta made the decision to do it alone. The extensive research investigative journalists conducted goes on to reveal a whole web of Swedish elitists and social democrats who rub their hands on Greta's success in persuading developed countries to take measures and deal with the alleged environmental crisis. Countries such as England and Ireland, who announced climate emergency, they took part, and these people's motives are certainly green, but not the green Greta aims for. Instead, their goal is to extract massive amounts of money from the workers or to shift the sustainable energy systems through taxation. Other than Rentshog and David Olsen, his business partner and CEO of We Don't Have Time, the scheming web behind Greta includes Christina Persson, who inherited She inherited an abundant industrial wealth, and she founded a think tank named Global Challenge, or Global Utmaning, and invited both Rentshog and Olsen to be chairman and members of the board. The board of the Global Challenge Group also includes Peter Skogar, who is the president of what's considered to be the largest employers' association in Sweden. Furthermore, Anders Wickman, the Club of Rome's president and chairman of the Environmental Objectives Council, who was also involved in both Thorin's search for the young people for climate change emergency propaganda and protests, and amongst others, Katharina Ringborg, who used to be the Swedish Water CEO and vice president of ABB, a Swedish-Swiss energy corporation, and is currently an advisor of the International Energy Agency. Katharina is a member of yet another company named Sustainable Energy Angels, together with 4 of her former colleagues from ABB. So some media platforms that believe the climate change movement has become politicized, capitalist industry... some people... believe that the movement has been politicised. Sorry about this. I
don't think people really know the true hypnotic power of television. You know how it pulls us in and just keeps telling us to consume, buy, and tells us to hate each other and separates us and causes the greatest divides, all under the name of entertainment. And every time I turn on my TV, it's just like no surprise. It's all of those programs, isn't it? Pushing out lies.
Eyes lie, but take a look inside. They mirror the sights you'll see.
Oh, so sorry about that. I've set my phones up here to pick up some phone calls for me because they're pretty urgent, and I try to take them in between the live show because they're essential. They're really essential. So anyway, the One Movement is focused on solving the extreme poverty challenge and includes funding from George Soros, amongst many, Bill and Melinda Gates, Google, Bono, and Bob Geldof. And these people, they're not my kind of people. However, George Soros and Bill Gates have also made significant investments in the oil and gas industry, which Greta and the climate change movement fights against, and which they're fighting against so fiercely. So according to the investigation of the Daily Caller News Foundation in 2017, Soros invested around 160 million in fossil fuel corporations, and these industries are considered to be the very reason for the global warming and the climate change that, according to the environmental activists, threaten our very existence on an alarming level. The involvements in the oil and gas industry of both Soros and Gates cancels their alleged efforts to secure and improve life for those less fortunate and preserve our environment. The logic behind their investments on both sides, as some articles point out, is to profit, regardless of the outcome. Experts believe that they hope for enormous amounts of money once there's a shortage of energy in the world, which would result in oil and gas reaching ridiculously high prices. And if we listen to the science, as Greta herself asks us, it would also tell us, at least according to some scientists and researchers, that the fossil-free ecosystems are still far out in the future, as the technology these systems depend on is yet to be perfected in order to give satisfying results on a large scale, and still highly expensive, especially when it comes to restructuring whole countries. So the suggestions that Gates and Soros are betting on both teams aren't that hard to believe, seeing as Soros himself is considered as a manipulator that bets on the financial markets and enables the destabilisation of many countries. I talked about this last week also, and a proof of this can be found back in 1992 during Black Wednesday, when George Soros released speculations about the British pound and earned the epithet "the man who broke the Bank of England." So, perhaps evidence that elitists and social democrats use Greta for their personal interests wouldn't be considered a highly immoral and almost monstrous act if she wasn't a teenage girl that suffers from a high-functioning autism, Asperger's, depression and OCD. Because of her mental condition and the false climate change urgency presented to her, as some critics believe, the young girl lives in everyday fear, and it's rare for her that she might not be able to see a future, and this made her a perfect presenter. And to make it worse, they seem to sell her a far more agitating reality than it actually is, and they portray her a world that is collapsing due to global warming, and then use her fears to spread hysteria around a global issue that's not nearly as alarming as presented. Instead of her receiving a treatment for having this mental disorder, which would have actually be of value to her well-being, they got her up on the stage. And they're also passing this message on to many other young children. And once again, they're children, they don't know any better. And their parents have bought into it also, and they're selling the idea to the children. So not only are there concerns about Greta's well-being, but they also fear that her scaremongering also causes depression, anxiety, and it's also increasing the fears of the end of the world and many other children, especially seeing as she has an enormous influence on kids and teenagers around the world. And the panic she created, as experts state, can't possibly lead to any good, much like any other panic-driven situation. And some people go as deep as fearing that the end of the world horror scenario she spreads may inspire someone to take far more radical and destructive measures. An example which would be eco-terrorism, as done by Ted Kaczynski, who murdered 3 people and injured 23 for his cause. So most of her critics put the blame of this on her parents, who may not be entirely aware that Greta is being used as a puppet in a far more entangled web and not at all real scenario driven by financial motives. And I can kind of go with this. I think to myself, okay, these people are wannabes, they're actors, they want to present themselves all the time, they want to be in the limelight, and they may have been pulled in by people at a higher level, and those people manipulated them into using your daughter, and that is actually food for thought. But I'll get back to Greta on in part 3 on the next show, and hopefully this will encourage you to go out and do some of your own research. But the climate change hoax has been unravelled, and I'm glad to be one of those who can spread that news. So on that, I'm going to leave you on a happy note this week. I don't want to leave you with Greta grief, and I'll see you soon. I'm the OBG.
Mufasa, you know if you say beer can in a British accent, you sound like a Jamaican saying bacon.
You're lying.
I never lie to you.
Let me try. Beer can. Beer can.
Hey!
Just give me the light. Just give me the light. Just give me the light.
Let's go, baby. Hey,
Just give me the light. Hands up the jaw.
hey, one,
Yeah, them in on the sides and I got to
let's
know.
go.
Which one is
Move,
gonna get my flow?
go,
Come in the
baby.
vibes and
Go,
I got
baby.
my
Go,
dough.
baby. Let's go, baby.
Them
Hey,
looking eyes, I got to know.
go.
Could I be your colleague?
What?
Fucking everything.
What?
Everyone around them
Hey.
for your inspector.
Hey.
Don't let them tell
Let's
you
go.
with the lecture.
Let's
Put
go.
up for a dinner, you ain't
I don't think people really know the true hypnotic power of television. You know how it pulls us in and just keeps telling us to consume, buy, and tells us to hate each other and separates us and causes the greatest divides, all under the name of entertainment. And every time I turn on my TV, it's just like no surprise. It's all of those programs and they're pushing out lies, and in between there's the adverts and they do it again, and they're trying to convince us that we're friends and have us trained like good little soldiers. 1, 2, 3, 4.
They were going to spend $1 trillion this Christmas, believe it or not.
Watch again in slow motion. See how mild and good tasting a cigarette can be. Or doctors smoke. Watch it again in slow motion. Watch it again in slow motion.